Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Pont, the Politique once again. Uthando lwethu kaDlanga, umuntu ongayongwayo emalini ngimumkhumbuzo. Uyanamkela kwesinye isiqendu sethu sika Pont, the Politique. Wonderful and great that we have had one of the most eventful weeks in our country, and especially in relation to the local government elections for 2021 in South Africa. And on Thursday, the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa had made and announced the results of this year's 2021 local government elections. As you know, everybody has been saying something, and everybody has seen how far majority of the parties have fared. And now we understand that there has been many analysis, there has been a lot of things that have been taking place, especially in relation to the end of the power or the hegemony of the African National Congress through the parties like the Democratic Alliance, EFF, and the so-called clean sweep in KwaZulu-Natal that we've seen with the Inkatha Freedom Party, and also the performance of the newly found party of Mr. Herman Mashaba, Action SA, which has made great inroads in this year's elections. And also we have seen that parties like the Congress of the People have lost extensive seats nationally, but we've also seen excuse me, a great aspect of work being done by parties like the Pan-Africanist Congress. But one of the surprises that I felt like they were before the elections was the failure to make great inroads by the independent candidates. So today we are going to be discussing these results. And majority of the time, there is a particular framework that people utilize to define or to analyze certain things. In this platform, we tend to use a more Pan-Africanist orientation into how we define certain things. So welcome everybody. Watch us on YouTube, Pont the Politique, Facebook page, Pont the Politique, on Lunga Mantashe's profile on Facebook. You just follow Lunga Xolisa Mantashe, you'll find this live session. Lastly, we want to apologize that we are starting at 5 o'clock today. The reasons are that we are going through these scheduled load shedding troubles. So as much as we have announced that the program will start at 6, but today we have decided to start at 5 in order to counter for the load shedding. So it's one of those troubles that we had experienced. So we apologize to our viewers at home about this problem. We also are asking you to continue to subscribe to our Pont the Politique page, which is on YouTube, and you must continue to follow us on Facebook. We have opened a new platform on Instagram. So we are looking forward to have those people who are on the Insta as part of our viewers on this wonderful and great platform. So thank you very much, colleagues and comrades and friends. I've got two specific and great thinkers in our time. One of them is does not need that much introduction. Zama. Zama, welcome to this program. How are you, sir?
No, thank you very much for having me, Keita. I'm good. Looking forward to this interesting conversations. You know, there's been a lot of, talk about what do people think these elections mean. Do they have any material shifts, or, some of the things have been a lot subjective, but hopefully we can have a broad perspective on what we have seen.
Thanks. Yes. No, it promises to be a great discussion. And secondly, we've got Lunga Mantashe, as you all know him, Lunga Mantashe is the Deputy President of the Pan-Africanist Congress, and he's also having, he's going to be part of the discussion today. Lunga, good evening or good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Tando, and thanks for having me in this important discussion.
It's good. It promises to be a great discussion, and I know you are great thinkers in your own rights. So I want to quickly run and get straight into the point. Remember, majority of people who watch this show and the ideas around this show when it was established was to make things simpler for an ordinary citizen, voter, and because we have noticed that there has been a lot of subjectivity in how things have been discussed. So let's run quickly to it. Just a short view on how you viewed the local government election. Let's start with you, Zama, as you rightly have said. What has been your view of the local government elections in our country?
No, thank you, Kate. I think by training, I'm a mathematical science graduate, so I deal with a lot of numbers, and I think my interpretation will be based on that, on what are the numbers telling us, and not what people think it's the problem or what we've seen. But I think I have 4 points just as an introduction to the conversation. I think one of the biggest things that people are debating about these elections is the lower turnout. People didn't go vote. Um, Generally, since the dawn of democracy, we've been having a steady decline, of course, of people just don't voting. What's interesting with these elections is that there's been a huge drop as compared to the other years. So we're dropping from around 50% to around 30% of turnout. And even how we measure turnout is still a narrow perspective of those who registered, and not all those who are eligible. So out of those who've registered, only 1 out of 3 people actually pitched at the polls. But you still have another 17 million of people who have the right to vote who decided we're not even going to register. So there's that big number. And normally voter turnouts, this number, if you go to another country, they'll tell you it's normal because in most bourgeois, countries, people don't vote because, they don't think it changes anything. But what's interesting with what we've seen is that in this case is the rate of drop, which is one of the highest we've seen since democracy, and it's one of the biggest in terms of the periods in between the voting times. So that's very important to point out that people stayed away in this election. Over 30 million of South Africans decided, well, it's not important to vote. So that's number one. Number two, we have what also the numbers are telling us that we have a crisis of an alternative in our society. So yeah, there's parties that grew. The EFF grew, the VF Plus grew, IFP grew, PAC grew, but the rate of growth as compared to those who decided not to come and vote is far lower. So people rather not vote than to vote for the alternatives. That's what the numbers are saying. For example, the EFF grew by 2%, which is always the number that they grow, but that will take, I don't know what, 60 years for it to come to the level of the ANC. So that's very low growth. And even in a time where ANC is losing heavily, this is one of the biggest drop of the ANC. The parties, the alternative parties, are still very far away from the ANC. So, for example, the ANC got 40% of the vote. The second party following the ANC got 20% of the vote. So the ANC still got twice as much the vote that the second alternative would have gotten. And the DA got 20% of the vote, which is twice what the EFF has gotten. So no matter how ANC drops heavily, the gap between it and the alternative parties, it's still too great that we're seeing any shifts in the thing. And you kind of believe some of the theories that people say those who stayed away are actually voters of the ANC and ANC supporters. But I'll be quick. Let me finish my 2 points. The other point is that we are seeing with the vote and the numbers a shift politically to the right. So the parties that are growing is your VF Plus with their African nationalism, it's your Action SA with their xenophobia, it's the PA, Patriotic Alliance with their xenophobia. So you kind of colored nationalism moving at there. South Africans are moving to a point where they want parties that say they want to act and have no ideological bearing. And the ideological bearing, if it's there, it's the one of the right. And that even though the PAC grew, even though the EFF grew, but the biggest growth in the low turnout, people who benefited are people of the right. So that's number two. The last point in these elections is that there's a hallowing of democracy and ideas and political leadership. So how people are treated as passive receivers of services. While delivering services is a political act, but it's not local government. So our people in the local areas are told that service delivered were bombarded with this and nothing about governance and transformation and the changing of people's lives. And that I think is positive because when I was in Joburg last week, this Uber guy told me he voted for the VF Plus because he just wants to see things get done. So this is what we see preliminarily for the numbers, that there's a move to the right. There is more of staying away and not believing in the process, or unless you are voting for the ANC, and that we're continuously being, a one-party state. That it will take years and years and years to displace the ANC at this rate of growth of other parties. We have a crisis of an alternative. We have low voter turnout, and we have the depoliticization of local governments. So that's the first reading. Kate, I submit. I think the Keda is lost network. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, yes. I've not connection there because the electricity just decided to keep quiet.
I think maybe Comrade Lunga can come in while he's still figuring the connection there.
Yeah, because I'm not quite sure whether the camera is able to actually hear what's happening. It looks like he's been cut off or something like that. Because the screen is frozen.
Load shedding.
Coming back. Yeah.
Lunga, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I'm sorry. I think my internet connection just got disrupted there a little bit. But Zama was he closed off with a part of the growth to the right, the growth to the right of parties that are about to do something. So, what is your opening? What is your basic view of this entire local government elections?
Yeah, I think first of all, the point that I would like to make is that there is a perception that local government elections is about water and electricity and closing potholes and kind of creating jobs or something like that. I think this perception is misguided because it makes an assumption that there is a difference between local government and national government. In the first place, for local government to function, it needs national government to function. It gets funds from national government, from the national revenue. And if you look at the ways in which the local government is designed, for example, you can see that some municipalities have more money than others. And they are designed in such a way that it is assumed that a municipality is a municipality separate from the national government to some degree. And so this perception that local government is about service delivery is this, I think, problematic assumption for me, which makes people think that when they are voting in local government, they are voting for something different than when they are voting in the national government, in the national election. So it seems to me that that is a key issue that needs to be really ventilated and clarified to the people about what is the difference between, and whether there is a difference, or it is just a divided thinking that is perpetuated by political authorities and the political class. The second thing that I think is critical, if you look at this local government election, is the way in which this local government is also characterized by the failed politics of multiracialism and the tribal politics. If you look at parties, for example, like the Patriotic Alliance, which sources its own vote from predominantly the colored community. In other words, it rode on a tribal sentiment, and it also rode on a narrow nationalist sentiment of, say, chasing away foreigners and so on. And if you look at parties like the a good party, for example, it's also a party that is predominantly taking its votership from the colored community. And you can look at, we can take other examples like the Freedom Front Plus. It's a predominantly Afrikaner political organization. So you can see that there is growing multiracial politics and tribal politics in the sphere even of local government, and this actually permeates to the national sphere of government. So this indicates actually that society is not getting better in terms of understanding the fundamental problems of society. It simply feels like politicians are now riding on the tribal racial sentiments in order to accumulate seats. And I think this is quite a dangerous trajectory of politics, because then politics is not getting better. Politics is getting more worse. It's getting divided, and people are getting more divided than they actually were pre-1994. And I think these two key issues for me are critical. And just to make a last point, with the idea of the low voter turnout, I think, first of all, the mainstream media and politicians try to provide a justification for the low turnout. They say it's because of COVID, it's because of the timing. I think these two are excuses. In a society of ideologically conscious and nationally conscious citizens, you would never have this kind of thing. What it tells you, because this is an international challenge, what it tells you is that there is a global lack of understanding of politics, and the global lack of understanding of the meaning of elections themselves. And so the discussion that perhaps we need to have is how far we've gone as a global society in creating a more cultured space of ideological debates and discussions, and the importance of participating in the political process. And of course, this is not to say that the political electoral system is an appropriate one, but the reality is that we have to deal with the fact that most people just don't like to vote because they just don't believe in the political system anymore. It's illegitimate. And quite frankly, one should be able to say that this election is illegitimate because it does not reflect the will of the majority.
Just at that point that you you just ended on, I want us to move back a little bit. Thank you for those opening remarks, and they were a very, very fiery, and they were very fiery, kakhulu kakhulu unjonjo. And there's somebody who says on Twitter, "Uwe Zama," on your opening discussion, and he was saying that, and I think he spoke to the fact that you are talking about the increase of the right, and you are alluding that there is this increase of the right, but the others also they are increasing. Like you mentioned the Freedom Front Plus, you mentioned the Action SA, you also mentioned the PAC, which Deputy President speaks to ordinarily. And now, Uduma, just note this question: what must other political parties do in relation to gain that growth? So just note that at the back of your mind. So when you are talking, you will begin to engage on those things. But from the perspective, you spoke about the numbers, and Mantashe also speaks about the numbers. But Mantashe takes it a little bit further and talks about that the elections were not, they should rather be referred to as illegitimate. But another argument somebody can place is that, but it was the choice of the people to vote, and it was also their choice not to vote. So they had the freedom to go and cast their vote. They also had the freedom not to go and cast their vote. However, he solves that argument by saying that majority of people just don't like to vote because it doesn't help them on anything. But also those who just feel like they don't even understand the importance of participation in these processes. Now that we are here, let's engage. You put both of you your opening remarks. Now let's engage. You can speak to the points that Uzama has spoken to, Mantashe, for a few minutes. Just what is your view in what Zama was saying in relation to the growth of the parties that go to the right specifically? How would you then speak to that particular point of the growth to the right?
Yeah, I mean, the growth of the political parties on the right actually indicates the degeneration of political consciousness of the masses of our people. I mean, particularly given the fact that in South Africa, you've got over 17 million people living under social grants. You've got an unemployment rate sitting at 5 out of 10 as we speak. Close to 50% of the people of this country are unemployed, and so that's one way of actually interpreting the problem of politics moving towards the right, as the case seems to be now. But the other way of interpreting them is that people are getting muddled up in this idea of being practical. Apparently, being more practical is to go to the right, and to advance capitalistic tendencies, is to advance the existing capitalist mode of production. I think this is deadly mistaken, because people make an assumption that if we vote for the DA, if we vote for the Freedom Front Plus, we're voting for more practical people who, in the words of the DA, quote unquote, are going to make things happen. So, that kind of thinking by society is this anti-ideological thought process of the masses of our people, which demonstrates the point that I think Zama was raising earlier on about the depoliticization of society and the deculturing of the masses of our people, about particularly the importance of ideology. Politics currently is being made to drown in the confusion of what could be called pragmatism, the idea of let's be practical, as if being practical means let's be capitalistic.
Zama?
Yeah. Generally, I mean, the local elections are the most depoliticized form of elections and governance directly. I mean, if you think about, let's say, provincial, governance, you have the provincial legislature, and you have various committees there. For example, you have the petitions committee. So anyone, anywhere in a country, in a province, can put up a petition through the petitions committee, it goes through the parties debate what is raised by that person at the legislature. So the question is, where do we find those spaces of governance in the ward level? You see, there's no spaces where abahlali can stand at the local level and say, Tina, sihlala, this is how we want this place to be governed. We think this can be improved like this. How people are now treated as passive receivers, that there's leaders, as commissars, or there's people who can get things done. That must be done for people at the local level. So it's important that we note that and how that serves the right more than it can help with the left. Because already the left is associated with rhetoric and not being able to deliver to the people, which is important because if you can't provide secure water, electricity, you have no business talking about jobs. Because I mean, how do you create, jobs without key economic inputs? Because to run a factory, you need the electricity, you need the water, but you can't. You're not providing it. So it means that you have no business creating jobs. Therefore, it is seen as rhetoric to our people, and our people saying, "No, this thing doesn't work. We've been promising jobs for many years now." So it's very interesting that at the local level, there's a kind of a rejection of politics, of democracy, of engagement, and that local elections are like the municipality has stopped being a governance structure, but it's a service provider, which is something that we must think about in terms of how does local elections and local government form part of a transformative project and not a service delivery project. So that's important.
But what about the argument that one would raise about? I'm asking this on to you specifically, Zama. That what about the argument that people are not necessarily disillusioned by politics per se, but they are disillusioned by the governing party, which in their mind determines or defines what is governance, because they know no other party that has governed post 1994. What about the argument that the people who are choosing the other side are opting for it because they feel like the party that they have known to have promised to deal with their basic necessities and the basic needs has not done that. So therefore they decide, if there's no alternative, therefore, because they don't know any alternative, by the way, then they say, let's go to the right. What about that argument? Does it hold water somewhere along the way?
No, I mean, definitely, that's what the numbers are telling us. The numbers are saying people would rather stay at home than vote for another party. Because if you look at the numbers of people who stay at home and look at the numbers of people who have become new voters for alternative parties, it's a huge gap. So people are saying,
correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's either I vote for the ANC or I vote for nothing. I mean, what we're seeing in the Eastern Cape, in Limpopo, in the Northern Cape, is that they're still strong. The ANC is growing to become a ZANU PF of some sort, where it's a party.
About 65% in some municipalities.
So 80 up to 80, 90, you go to Limpopo, you go to the deep rurals in Northern Cape, you go down to Mpumalanga.
Let me check that.
So and that's why the gap between the first party and the second party is still so wide. And that we need a party that can convince people who decide not to vote, if they're not voting for the ANC, to vote for them. That's what we need. Because if we are doing the long road and say that we want to stay and defeat it a bit, that is 60 to 100 years at the rate of growth of the parties that are growing.
That is currently taking place.
Yeah, practically the EFF is growing at 2% every election. The GA, which is the number 2, is slashing. It's going down in very high places. So the parties that are even close to trying to challenge the ANC are still too far from the ANC. So there's I'm attracted to the position that the people who decided to stay away are people who of the ANC.
Who would vote for the ANC ordinarily?
Yes, and if they get what they want from the ANC, I don't know, Cyril
Then there's
steps
no reason
down
for
or
them to go
whatever
to the other
happens.
side.
2024, the ANC comes back. That's how
Yeah.
the thing is.
Mantashe,
Yeah, I mean, first of all,
the,
yeah, I think first of all, they are not. Look, first of all, I don't know and I don't believe that the people who are not voting belong to the ANC or would vote for the ANC. I mean, these are millions of people actually, let alone the ones who had registered. There were a couple of about 10 million people who did not vote and who did not even register to vote. Certainly, those people are not members of the ANC at all, because anyway, we've had this apathy for quite a long period of time. So I don't believe the argument that they are solely members of the ANC. It is possible that some of the group that decided not to vote may have been disappointed by the ANC. But secondly, for me, I think the key issue to really think about in terms of what's likely to happen going forward about voting is that people no longer believe that their problems will be solved merely by voting. And that's why people have been engaged in one form or another of a revolutionary struggle against the system through what they call service delivery protests, for example, the protests for water, for electricity, for electricity cuts or for water cuts, or fighting for increased wages. I mean, those are forms of revolutionary struggles which may unfortunately be leaderless, as the case may be currently. But the reality for me is that the problems that people are experiencing are not going to be solved by more elections or a different alternative party actually taking over the state or municipality. It's true that one party may take some municipality and pretend to run it very well, just like the DA has done in the Western Cape, in the city of Cape Town. But hey, look at the Western Cape. Where do most people actually stay? They stay at Kwalanga, Kailicha, and they remain landless and they remain poor, unemployed, jobless, etc. What it tells you is that it's not a question of whether you have a different party that can chase the ANC and chase it out of power, because you've got to look at what the other political parties are actually saying. They are saying they want to end corruption. So what they miss, it seems to me, is that corruption is a deeply endemic, entrenched, and embedded activity within a capitalist setup. So within a capitalist setup, within a system of tender premiership, for example, corruption is bound to take place one way or the other. So the idea that one party is going to come in and run a clean municipality creates an illusion that a clean municipality is a functional municipality that provides water, electricity, at cheaper rates of electricity and so on. So, for example, you can't solve the electricity problem unless and until you have not just ownership of the power plant, but also the coal industry itself, the mine itself. If you have ownership of the trucks that transport the coal from the mine to the to the power plant or to the station itself. So I think the point for me is that the elections themselves are not a solution per se. And this is what people are beginning to actually realize by refusing to go to the polls. What do you think they're going to do? I think what they're going to do is they're going to support every form of protest. And that's where our focus should be. It should be to mobilize communities that are not necessarily involved in the voting process, to actually mobilize and organize them into a formidable force, because it's insufficient to simply not go and vote and sit down and say, oh, I'm throwing my hands in the air. I'm tired of the ANC. I'm tired of the system. And therefore, I'm just going to sit here and hope that things are going to change by just magic.
Oh, I hear you. Do you have an input to make there, Zama, before I take us further into this discussion?
Yeah, no, I just want to speak to what Comrade Lunga is saying. I mean, voting is just one form of democracy participation. It's not the most important one, even. But I mean, South Africa is defined in the post-apartheid setting by service delivery protests. What people call that. People in the streets, in the townships, in the rural areas, fighting for water, electricity, week in, week out, to a point where South Africa has been termed in many years, a protest capital. But those protests haven't developed, no matter how many are they and how strong they haven't developed to any form of change. And I think that how to fix a municipality and what people are proposing. There's people who are saying no, municipalities don't have enough funding. No, municipalities, the problem is the corruption and the political interference. People in the treasury say no, the problem with municipalities is that there's no tight financial controls. They don't get people to pay rates. Like there's a lot of kind of different reasons coming from obviously different class positions on how do we fix local governments and how do we fix, improve the lives of people. And of course, we know generally, I mean, if you talk structurally, that this is a problem of neoliberalism and capitalism. But I think in many ways, our people are still thinking about how do we at least try to get the basics right. Because as I said, if you want to talk about, you can't talk about jobs and transformation and improving livelihoods, and you fail to deliver water. It's impossible. It's crazy. You can't create jobs. You can't create copper. You can't distribute land. You can't do anything. So interesting on what's happening with the coalition talks and what the political parties are putting out.
I want just hold on to that, because I want us to move into that conversation very, very quickly. As things stands, what I'm picking up from Lunga, out of all these political parties that are here, I think there's even Batupili Party, there's Batupili Movement, there's Bela Bela Community Revolution, there's a Ari Aheng, there's a Arusha Economic Coalition, Azanian Resident Party, and there's many of them. And Lunga seems to be making a suggestion that majority of the process, the party, the bucket itself lacks the vision beyond. And he makes a very important thing about the importance of political literacy. And I worry about this type of an argument, because sometimes people, by not voting, maybe it's another level of understanding that we are politically literate. That is why we are not voting, because our understanding of politics is that politics is elections, and neoliberal democracy is principled within 5 years, voting, queue, make an X, and hold people accountable. Now, if people understand that as political literacy, how would you then, what would other parties do to make sure that we are able to get the group of people that is no longer interested to voting? Because that question was asked to you, Zama, earlier. And Lunga has said that we need to rewire the political literacy. And that question was posed to you, the first thing that you started because of that. Immediately after this point, you are going to interrogate the problematic of the coalition government. So Lunga is claiming that we need to rewire. People must begin to understand how politics are run, and what is the idea of liberal democracy and the liberal political system. Now, in your view, parties like it, there's a party that has got 45 votes. Azapo has got 6,000, which is one of the liberation movements. The PAC has got 21,000, and the ANC has got 5 million somewhere there. And what must these, and Freedom Front Plus has grown so much, even its representation. So what do you think must be done as a way of bridging this gap?
You see, the funny thing, Tando, about this is that we have a large growing number of parties, but the lower turnout. We have currently now over 150 registered parties. We've seen a huge rise in the independent candidates. That Musi Maimane vibe. We've never seen such high levels of independent candidates in an election. We've seen so people, even when they're saying I'm running as a community member, I'm running as someone you know from the community, as an independent. People haven't felt that they can give those people a chance. So you have a crisis of an alternative. That's my point. Is that no matter how many people we add in the ballot, no matter how many parties we add on the ballot, the people are still not moved. This is what the elections has taught us. These local elections, that the problem, people don't think the problem is the personnel, because we are blessed. We are blessed with parties, we're blessed with liberation movements, we are
So
blessed with independent candidates. But I mean, it's like someone serving you all kinds of meat, and you are just saying, I see
I
nothing.
would want.
You know, I see, which is interesting. So we don't need. I agree with Lunga. There's no need for more parties. That route has proven that people don't see a new party. You know, but I mean, in terms of strategy and tactics, of course, we must separate. It's not a discussion of ideology or political standing.
Yeah.
That in a matter of strategy and tactics, there's this, how do we take down the ANC? How do we take down this animal that's so big? And I think the electoral process, comrades, are too far. All those numbers to the ANC are 10%, 2% of the votes, 3% as Apo. To the ANC, like the gap is so big that these people are not playing the same league in terms of mass.
Yeah.
So my one of the suggestions, which is, I don't think it will work, is to get a new political party that challenges the ANC, that can convince over 30 million of South Africans who stay away to vote for it instead of staying home. And I think the ones that we have now have struggled to do that.
I'm not
This
doing that.
30 million is saying, Sikona, we are eligible to vote, but a Sibone alternative, Aiko, we'd rather stay at home.
Lunga,
And I was actually going to jump in and say that, I mean, the idea that there could be another political party. I think Zama makes an admission himself that there are more political parties now than probably could be needed. I mean, I always make an example. I say even the most liberal democracies like the United States have only two big political parties, which are basically the same thing, the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. And my point is always to say that the solution is not adding more political parties, because there are really two ideas that govern the world. Anything else is in between or lies on one side or the other. The two ideas that govern the world is whether people are going to be capitalistic or socialistic in their frame of thought and in their framework. So the idea of more political parties, for example, is merely the creation of more political competition and the commodization of politicians themselves. It makes buying politicians actually cheaper, because the more political parties you have, the cheaper politicians become to buy in the market of political engagement. I think that's my response to the argument about adding more political parties. Is the solution to create least political parties? I think the solution is not creating least political parties. It is to create a mass of educated members of society who understand that there are really two roads. One is the capitalistic, it is the path that we've been in, and the other is a more socialistic road. The challenge now with the what my man six seems to like, the idea of independent candidates, is that what this idea does, which is going to be a very popular road actually post 2024. Yeah, but it's going to become more popular because at the national level you're going to have, independence springing up, coming true. I mean, this is a system that has been running in local government actually since Lord knows we know. So it's not like they are new. They are not new. There's nothing new about independent candidates. But what it does, which I think is extremely dangerous, is to create an impression that an individual can solve the problem of society. The second thing it does is to individualize the struggle, is to put trust on individuals is to create an illusion in society that if you put me, I'm going to solve your problem. And the guy that you put in must go and must go in the thick and the heat of things in the municipal councils, and they cannot do a damn thing. They cannot do a damn thing. I mean, because the first thing is they get stifled. They can't get budget for their awards. Let's say they win the award, but they get stifled by politicians there. So it's a game, and the individuals are entering the game of politics that is not that does not function in the gain of the societies and communities from which they come. So that I think is a terrible mistake. So individual candidates is just not the way to go, right? Yeah. It's just not the way to go. Yeah.
No, I agree. And for me, the reason why I see that they are not working, I've got a thesis that says because like capitalism, neoliberal democracy goes through crises. So within these crises, it will get into the crisis, want to reinvent itself so that it can survive the crisis by creating a further crisis so that it can say, I am trying to solve my problems, but by trying to solve the problem, it is actually creating another problem. And going to the coalition, and somebody just told me just now, asked me a question. Maverick, if somebody, I vote for a certain party, and this party does not govern, but it takes my vote and go and discuss with a party that I don't want, and it gets into a coalition, can't I litigate that party that I voted for? Because I didn't want that party that they are doing a coalition for. Speak on coalitions, which they did not work in 2016. They created a crisis in Swane, in the DA and in PE. What is your view? Zama, you wanted to jump into this, but let us quickly give Ulunga, because he might leave us earlier. There is a crisis for me personally to have these coalitions. What is your view, and what would you suggest people must pick up from these coalitions and coalitions discussions and so on and so forth?
I think right at the beginning, let me just point out that these are not coalition. This is collusion of politicians. So politicians are going to collude together. And now that the people have voted, their votes are going to be brought together back again by politicians in a kind of, in the name of coalition. There's not going to be a coalition, it's going to be a collusion. So there are two kinds of things that are going to happen. First is the collusion, second is collision. Because these parties obviously are going to fight with each other because they are colluding. So because there's no honor among thieves, and because when people gang up together in the name of working on behalf of the people, they are likely to fight amongst each other, and this is precisely why the DA fought with the EFF at Nelson Mandela Bay, Tshwane, and the city of Joburg. This is precisely why they fought. It's because the collusion itself was basically a collusion against the fact that people have voted in the way that they did. So I think that we've got to be careful about this idea of collusion. But secondly, it depends why people engage in a collusion. And the reason, if political parties that are engaging in a collusion together, if those political parties come together, Tando, and their ideological frameworks are colliding, so the collision is bound to happen. Okay, so what have I said to you? I'm saying to you, these collusions are in fact collusions, and the result is a collision. Particularly because if you have, say, a party like a party like a patriotic alliance. So a collision is like cars coming together into a crash, into an accident.
Yeah.
Which is what happened. Which is what happened in Nelson Mandela Bay. That was a collision. You see. So the idea of collusion is a simple one. Is that thugs come together and they claim to represent everybody else, and they say, "Oh, in the name of service delivery, let's come together." There's no such a thing. If they were going to come together in the name of service delivery, why did they have political parties that were different in the first place? Right? There's no such a thing. See, so that's my point. Just summary. Yeah.
Zam.
Oh no, yeah, Shapir. Before I speak on this issue of coalition, I want to say we also note, and maybe we must do an analysis on what does the participation of the left parties have meant, whether they are growth or they are decrease. What are we seeing there as they participate in elections? Is number one. For me, the Makanda experiment, I think it's the one that stood up for me in these elections. The Makanda Citizen Front with the unemployed people's movement or Ayanda Kota Paekhin. They've tried to actually push back. They got some PR seats, and at least there's kind of a pushback from the community and kind of have center left politics, but it's grassroots, it's engaging, and it's out of action because you remember, hey, there's been shutdowns and there's been a lot of
Yes.
things that have been happening there. So I think we must look into those kind of upcoming center left, but they kind of progressive, and what do they mean moving forward? With the coalition, I mean, we're set for disaster.
I think I think those movements that Zama is talking about. Yeah.
Sure.
Lunga, continue. What
I'm
were you
sorry. I
saying
was
about
just going to
movements?
say that I think those formations that you're talking about, that you're talking about at the grassroots level, I think you are right that, and I think I wanted to make a point and say, there are people that come together with all good intentions, to want to do the right thing. And when they get into municipal councils, they get into this web of complexity and difficulty and fights. And then they themselves, if they are weaker, in their levels of consciousness, become consumed by those kinds of fights and politics of power and the dynamics at the level of municipality. I think one of the things that we have also been saying going to this election, for example, as the PAC, was the need to have to establish what we would call people's organs of power, so that people, wherever they are, if you have been deployed in the local municipal council, you are in a position to quarterly go to society and report and give an update of what's happening in the municipality, to constantly be immersed with the people themselves, so that you don't get consumed by what's happening in the municipality, because then your levels of consciousness begin to degenerate. I mean, if you stayed in the water for quite some time, you will be forced to swim, I suspect.
But how
No,
are you
no,
going to do that? But sorry, Sami, you'll get it. How are you going to do that if, therefore, the majority of the citizens, because your argument of earlier was about that there is this lack of understanding of how to make these elements work. There seems to be a lack of understanding. And those Makana citizens, Makana
Yeah.
Independent New Deal, which got about 330 votes, was Zama that he was talking to. Zama, how can we, these such ideals and ideas that come up with parties like the PAC can then make sense? Because when you look at the people in Makan, they really had good intentions, and even the collisions or the collisions or the collusions that they would be taking place there. And it seems like there's a problem, or let's say it seems like there's something that is going on, but we are unable to pick it up. How can we make those things better, man? From your training, Sam, what do you see?
no. I think, I mean, as I said, they did very well. I mean, even if the ANC, Eastern Cape, still asking myself why this love for the ANC, it's crazy. But for me, it was a good example of how communities can try push back, and that the pushback becomes important and real because it comes from action and protest and people, because they did a lot of things. They took the council to court, wanted to dissolve it.
Remember,
It was
yes.
shut down. So I'm saying, for me, for moving forward, for parties and even leftist progressive organizations, for them to develop support is them to be grassroots and be there in the protest. And there's this thing that Lunga said, that the protest of service delivery, dominating the country are sort of are leaderless. Then the question is, where are the PAC cadres at the local state there in the service delivery process? Where are the ANC people in the service delivery process? Where are they? Because then that's where they are able to engage people in the community for possible change. Because then there is some energy coming from below instead of just looking at the menu and choosing what you want to eat, which our elections have become. But so that experience for me, I think it's the way forward. Service delivery protests are going to continue. They're going to be bigger. The comrades in the left must be in the service delivery protests. If there is anything,
that's what
Makana proves to us. That's what Makana proves.
That's what I was going to say, because that seems to be a very important. It's the same thing. Abahlali basemjondolo type of activism that is more imbued from the bottom, taking it up. Kolobeni activism, very great approach in how to contest this. Now, I wanted to ask, because normally the program we left about 3 minutes, and there were other aspects that I wanted us to engage on. I'm not sure if you can give me just a little bit more time, because I want us to go to KwaZulu-Natal and then go to Joburg. There's two things that I want to raise. Would it be possible for me to get an additional 10 minutes from either of you? Because I want us to engage something there in KwaZulu-Natal and in Joburg. Will that be fine?
I would have been gone I would have been gone like 10 minutes ago. So
yeah,
no.
Yeah. Let's do like this. I'll remain with Zama. Lunga, what is your parting shot to the viewers at home? We will then have to continue this conversation during the course of the week, because it seems like it is important, and there are other parts that we haven't dealt with. Your last parting shot, which we will think about when we meet again, we extend it further.
Yeah, when we meet again sometime in the future, political parties will have been fighting with each other in the municipal councils. They will not be fighting for servicing anybody. They will be fighting for having a share in the cake called power in the municipal councils. It is not about the people, it is about the politicians, it's about proximity, it's about getting closer to power as possible. They are pretending currently, they are saying they are not going to work with so and so. You will be surprised very soon to find that they will work with so and so, but they are negotiating, but they are tough negotiators, as the case may be. So that's the first point I wanted to leave as a parting shot. Secondly, there will not be any collusions in the true sense of acting in the best interest of the people. There will be collusion followed by collision, because there is no honor amongst thieves. The third point I want to make is to say that perhaps the best way forward as things stand is what Zama actually raises, the importance of the grassroots movement, and what the point that you've acceded to, the importance of immersing ourselves as revolutionaries with the masses and with the protests that they are engaged in on a daily basis, challenging the systems, because those are forms of revolutionary actions, revolutionary praxis. People are, responding to the settler colonial setup and the bourgeois setup in South Africa. So I think that the thing we need to think about very strongly going forward is that we are not going to solve problems of local government when we have not yet solved the problems of lack of ownership of anything in our country, the problems of dispossession of our land, the problem of exploitation of our labor by capital, and the problem of social degradation as a consequence of these two things. So I think until we have recognized the importance of this, I don't know if we have a very good vision, foresight as African people. But if you can imagine what could be called a people's mall, a people's property market, a people's bank, people controlling and being in charge of those things, even at the level of municipal councils. And then maybe you are really thinking about what could be defined as people's organs of power and people's power, people taking control of their own destiny by controlling the productive forces in their own local communities. I think the best case forward is to think about these issues at that national level rather than merely at the local government level. What we need to change is the structure of the political system at the upper end. And we need to think about the questions of ownership of our land as the primary means of production and access to any other things that we want to own. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy President of the PAC, Siyabulela Mantashe. All the best and travel well. Thank you for giving us that extra time. And goes Zama, in KZN, there was a sweeping of the Inkatha. And I'm saying it's sweeping, but this is my thesis. This is my thesis that part of the world always moves with Zulu nationalism. And therefore, the majority of people who voted for the ANC before 2021 might have voted for the ANC because of the person who was at the helm of the ANC, because it was representing something that they were relating to. Before President Jacob Zuma was a president of the ANC, Inkatha Freedom Party was in charge of majority of the municipalities. At his time, he then became that vote was then taken away again from the Inkatha. Now that he's no longer at the helm, it seems like the Zulu people have went back to their Inkatha. Not that there is something new that the Inkatha has done, but because the people have taken their default position. What would be your view in this thesis that I'm bringing, particularly to the Inkatha taking over that much? They had 638,963 valid votes. The total votes were 591,265. This is great. These are great numbers for Inkatha, and majority of them they are in KZN. So what is your view about that shift in KZN?
Sure, Tando. Before I answer the KZN question, I want to just talk about what the Vice President just spot on now. I think South Africans, there's a history of one-party state. Whether you are talking about the National Party to the ANC, we've always been ruled by one party, and the ANC has enjoyed two-thirds majority forever. It's the first time it goes under 50% of the vote. So we're expecting a lot of chaos, in this coalition agreement. And one thing I want to make for sure, and the point that you also raised, is that it's no longer about the people now. It's done now. It's not about whether you voted, because now we're going to see a lot of shift and floor crossing, a lot of coalitions of, inconvenience, marriages of inconvenience. And in political spaces that are like that, you have a huge issue of crisis. Because firstly, they don't agree on the thing, then the thing takes time, then there's no service delivery. And at that point, everyone pulls to their side. So there's going to be a lot of also, quid pro quo. Give me Tony, I'll give you Joburg. Give me this tender, I'll give you that. So that you don't,
No, you're correct.
So where we are going, not that I advocate for one party state, why 60%, two-thirds of ANC all the time, but as a new experiment that we're going in, there's a lot of learning that will happen, a lot of new things that will happen. In the 2016 experience, it was a bit less complicated because you kind of had the kingmakers. For example, in Joburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, Tshwane, we knew that whoever the FF votes for will be in council. But now it's not that easy because Action SA has made inroads in Joburg, they've made inroads in other places. You need more than one partner.
Correct. And all of these partners, sometimes they are.
Yes, and now most of them are right wing, and which is like the EFF is kind of surrounded in this case. So there's a lot of problems that we are going to encounter in terms of governance moving forward.
Yeah.
There are a lot of politics happening, a lot of money moving around, a lot of selling out. And the problematic thing about this political structure, as soon as someone is elected to council, the people who voted for the person have no power to take the person
Yes.
out. They have no power. The person can decide tomorrow, I know I'm joining the DA, and you won't be able to do anything because now they officially.
That's why I was asked that question of litigation.
So it's not long about the people. It's not long about the people. But on the KZN question, Keda, quickly, because I see we left with 3 minutes. You see that in KZN, in the dawn of democracy, '94, the IFP was actually the whole province. It was IFP, and I think a lot of work done by the Zumas, the William Kizes, and the other prominent ANC leaders actually brought in the ANC back in KwaZulu-Natal. And I think it has actually been a nice case as a province that shifts and changes. I think we don't see any like this in other rural provinces, whereby
Correct,
there's a
yes.
shift in power. So there is, even though the politics of shifting is on nationalism, but there's kind of an engagement of what we want, and we have a choice to choose otherwise. And I think with the Zuma riots, they contributed a lot here.
Yes.
Yeah, there's still a lot of Zulu nationalism that holds KZN. And I think we're still gonna see a lot of shifting. I don't think we must call out the ANC yet in KwaZulu-Natal. They still have potential to maybe come back. But yeah, I think that's the politics of KZN, and I mean there's also violence there that happens. The repression of Abahlali Basemtondo is still a big thing.
Yeah, correct.
That is
Yes.
still not answered to. But yeah, it's a very violent political space, and it shifts and changes very quickly. And I think that it's politically active, but it's repressive.
And yeah, that's one province, honestly, that has been changing in between. But the foundation seems to not be changing, but just the political part or the color of those that are governing has not been the same. Thanks, Lunga Zama, for making this point about that it's no longer about, it will no longer be about the people, especially that people now have voted. And Umasilo was saying to you, I concur with you. She sent this when you were making that point that there's going to be a lot of money shifting around, there's going to be a lot of flow crossing, there's going to be a bloodbath. And because of, there's many other things that tend to be involved in this. One last interesting outcome in the politics of these local government elections, I was going through them, is that there's a municipality in Mthunzi that has been under administration. It seems like some of its assets have been also attached. Are our viewers and yourself aware that in that council, in the results that have taken place there, in that municipality, the ANC did not receive any PR votes. It received 0.
Mm.
And that places a further crisis in the entire governing system. And it might provide others with exactly what you are saying, an opportunity to take my chair and cross to the other side because I see that there's a greener pasture on the other side. So how would you want, or how would you to help the citizen, our viewers at home, to take to bring these people that they voted for to account at those particular levels? Now that there is going to be this discussion, you've seen that Kada Asmal Institute or Foundation, they've released a paper that they think these should be the guiding principles of coalitions. Institute of Race Relations, there seems to have been these so-called pressure groups, political parties that are not registered as political parties that are giving the structures of how to negotiate. How would you help our viewers in understanding and bringing to account the people that they have voted for? You are saying this within the prism of your closing remarks.
Oh, okay. No, thanks. I think I don't see it. I don't see, there's no accountability framework. I mean, what the political parties and the independent candidates have been saying, that they're making people sign contracts and performance contracts. If the person doesn't perform, they can remove that. I mean, historically, we haven't seen that happening. Parties, I mean, most of the comrades who are chosen, they're not chosen because of their competence. And that's why there's also these, big talks around, hey, you need to have a degree to be a mayor, you need to have a postgrad, all kind of regressive kind of politics because of of the level of incompetence that we see in our municipalities, and that, over half of our municipalities are failing, over half of them, they have fruitless expenditure, all of them are collapsing, they can't provide services. So the kind of, we live in our standards, our bar is so low that it's even difficult to hold or to say or see a system of holding leaders that are elected to account. And also, how do the leaders get there? The internal party political lists that have nothing to do whether you're saving the people or not, and all that stuff.
Yeah, no,
And
that's
I think
correct.
the right is exploiting that by saying, yeah, we can get things done, we can what, and we are people of action, we are. So, but at the end of the day, they're professionalizing governance, which is a huge problem. And I think, yeah, but I don't see, especially now in the parties of the left, any forms of accountability. That the people, as I said, it's done.
So the citizenry is suffocated, basically.
Yeah,
they are suffocated
by the vote. You've surrendered your power by the vote. You have no rights now. You have no, because these are employees of the state, so they're not employees of you. But I mean, we know in reality, because you pay tax and all these things.
Yeah.
But you have So these discussions around you will take to court the party if it goes to a coalition with the party I don't want. Those things are not gonna hold any water. I mean, I don't think.
So one would say, if they are taking it to an extreme, that liberal democracy has got some tendencies of dictatorship.
I mean, there's a symbolism of that. If you vote, you have given off your power.
Yeah.
And that your leaders that you have entrusted with the state are no more and are better, and there's a clearer vision of the future and transformation.
They will determine what they will determine what is best for you.
So there's going to be a lot of disappointments coming out, because people will be shocked at how the coalitions, as the vice president said, that you live in C parties, you thought they're never going to come together, but now they're thinking of themselves, and everyone wants the pie. And I see them most of them are acting like they don't want power. They're like, no, we don't mind staying in the opposition bench. It's lies, they in the negotiations.
It's just a PR exercise.
So it's a scramble of power. It will get messy, and I think the people are done now. You guys have surrendered your vote. There's no discussion.
So you are actually saying that the people, as soon as people begin to understand that they have reached their use by date at this moment, they are not even going to be consulted for anything. Now that they have voted, anything for them is done. They are just going to be thrown out of the window. And this is a painful exercise. Zama, thank you very much. What would be very great is that for us to extend this conversation further, but I appreciate your mind. I appreciate the way that you are thinking. As much as we did not get deep into the individual political parties as specifically, but in the main, we've covered some of the things that we can think about. Hopefully, we are going to continue this conversation before the end of this week. And as Lunga was saying, that by the next time we meet, there will be blood on the floor. So thank you very much, my brother.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Ken. Thank you very much.
Engos.
Thanks for those who are watching as well.
Okay, bye-bye. Colleagues and friends, viewers at home, you've heard some of the views that were made by Lunga, Mantashe, and Zama, Mthunzi. Both of them, they are painting a gloomy picture of the electoral system. They are painting a gloomy picture of the things that happen in the main, especially now after this the elections. But what is important is that what is important is that people must begin to understand that at some point they hand over their power, and when they are participating in elections, they must understand that. And those that did not go to the elections, they were not only disgruntled, but they were also voting by not voting. So they must be understood within that paradigm. But what was a glaring and something that I had not thought about is that for our guests, they were clearly saying that the problems of understanding local government elections only from the local government perspective, it becomes problematic. They should be understood within the national politics, because it is difficult to want to act as if you can create jobs when you can't even provide sanitation, water, and so on and so forth. So, colleagues and friends, we have gone beyond the 6 o'clock because of the extent with which this program has run. But we appreciate you taking part in this. We did not take many of your comments, but we did see some of those comments that you've made. We're appreciative of you continuing to support this program. Continue to do that. Here is Pont, the Politique, and on YouTube, we've got that channel. Continue to like and share the views that are being made. And on an Instagram that we just got in, we would be very happy to make sure that we are interacting, and we would be taking your suggestions at that particular discussion. Lastly, we are going to be organizing a further, that is a part 2 of this discussion on local government 2021 results conversation. At that day, it will be soon, at that day, we will be expecting to hear your inputs as well. Now, thanks to Zama, thanks to Lunga, thanks to everybody else who has watched today. You've seen the local government elections. Let us wait and see. Today, there is a beginning of the negotiations of the Ulunga Uti, the collusion, and so on and so forth. Let us wait and see, but keep your eyes on the ball. Keep your ears on everything that is taking place, and know that you have done something by participating in the elections, but now your power, Zama, has been handed over to the political parties. Umntu umalinge uyengwa indima uNkumbuzo uthando lwethu umntana kaDlanga uyabulela uthi enkosi. Thank you for making the time. All the best. See you another time.